My name is Camille Rhodes, and I turned 33 last month. But I'll take you back to the day I stopped being a kid. When I was just 17, a straight A student, state debate champion, and the girl with a college savings plan she started at 13. A girl who believed, deep down, that if she worked hard enough, her family might one day look at her the way they looked at my little brother, Mason. That day, I came home to nothing but a house stripped bare and a note that said, "You're smart. You'll manage." No love, Mom. No goodbye. Just 9 words that flipped my world upside down. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. From the outside, we looked like any average suburban family. My dad, Harold, worked at a used car lot and had a way of charming anyone, until he started losing money in weekend poker games and blaming the world for it. My mom, Denise, was an office coordinator at a pediatric dental clinic and treated QVC like a personal therapy session. If it sparkled and came with 3 easy payments, she wanted it. Our family dinners were tight smiles and tighter budgets. I remember hiding my cereal in my backpack, just so I'd have breakfast on days when the fridge was empty except for a stick of butter and expired yogurt. Mason was 2 years younger, and everything I wasn't. Average grades, messy room, popular. My parents treated him like a prince. Me? I was their live-in tutor, part-time scapegoat, and full-time disappointment. When I brought home a perfect ASAT score, my dad's response was, "Don't go getting cocky now." My mom's? "That doesn't mean you're better than us." But my saving grace was my grandmother, my mom's mother, Eleanor. She was a retired IBM secretary, one of those women who learned computing before the rest of the world caught up. When I was 12, she gave me her old refurbished desktop with a post-it on it that read, "Use this to build something." She had no idea how much I would. She's the reason I started taking coding classes, the reason I fell in love with tech, and the reason I had a secret bank account with $5,000 in it, money she left me when she passed away my sophomore year. I didn't tell my parents. After what happened to my other savings, I knew better. At school, I was thriving. I won regional competitions, built websites for local shops, and even started tutoring underclassmen for a little extra cash. Every dollar went into my college fund until the day my mother borrowed $500 from it for the electric bill and never paid it back. That's when I stopped keeping money anywhere they could reach. They didn't understand me. That was fine. I figured if I kept my head down long enough, I could escape this home with a scholarship and a packed suitcase. I had a plan. What I didn't plan for was what happened on a cold Saturday in March. I had just won first place in the Lincoln-Douglas debate at a regional tournament in Raleigh. I held the trophy in my lap the entire bus ride home, beaming like maybe, just maybe, this time they'd be proud of me. The bus dropped me off 3 blocks from home. I ran the rest of the way, still in my blazer, heart pounding. The first sign, something was wrong? No cars in the driveway? Second sign? The curtains were gone. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The couch. Gone. The TV. Gone. The kitchen table. Gone. Even the family photos had been taken, the empty hooks swaying on the wall like they missed something. My voice cracked as I called out, "Mom, Dad? Mason?" Nothing. I walked room by room, my parents' bedroom, empty. Mason's room stripped. My own room had my bed frame, a few books, and the hoodie I left on the chair the day before. No food in the kitchen except a half-empty bottle of mustard and a box of stale crackers. On the kitchen counter, I saw a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, my hand shaking. It said, "Camille, we've had to make some hard decisions. We're relocating for a fresh start. You're smart. You'll manage. You can stay until the bank takes the house. Please don't try to contact us." Dad, I read it again and again. No apology, no explanation. They were just gone. I dropped the trophy. It hit the tile with a clatter. I sank to the floor and stayed there, trying to breathe. It was like drowning in air. My chest wouldn't rise. My heart was racing, but nothing else would move. They'd taken everything, even the $3,200 I'd hidden in my secondary savings account for textbooks and tuition deposits. I called every number I could remember. My dad, voicemail. My mom, voicemail. Mason rang once, then nothing. I called my aunt in Durham, who said she was so sorry, but couldn't take me in. They told me you'd be fine, she said. You're strong, Camille. I laughed. A wild, broken laugh. Strong? I was 17. Alone. And officially homeless in 29 days when the bank foreclosed. That night, I didn't sleep. I curled up on the bed with my backpack, hugging my laptop like a security blanket. I thought about running away, about finding them, about giving up. Instead, I went to school the next morning. Same clothes, same face, but a fire in me that wasn't there before. And that was the day I walked into my school counselor's office, handed her the note, and said, "My family left. What do I do now?" When I handed that note to Ms. Ramirez, my school counselor, her face went pale. She read it twice, then looked at me with a mix of horror and disbelief. "Camille, this is abandonment. It's not just cruel, it's illegal." By the end of the day, Child Protective Services had been called, and a social worker named Stephanie Cortez came to take my statement. That was the first time I ever said the words out loud. My parents left me. They emptied the house, drained my savings, and told me to figure it out. And just like that, the world I'd known was gone. Stephanie took photos of the house, the note, and the near-empty pantry. She explained the process: documentation, court proceedings, placement options. But bureaucracy moved slowly, and I still had nowhere to sleep that night. That's when someone stepped forward. Someone I never expected. Mrs. Daly, my debate coach. When she heard what had happened, she said without hesitation, "You'll stay with us, just until we figure something more permanent." Her home smelled like cinnamon and books. Her husband, a gentle high school history teacher, greeted me like family from day one. They didn't treat me like a burden. They let me cry without asking me to stop. They gave me a spare room, a warm meal, and space to breathe. In their house, I learned what quiet felt like. Not silence, but peace. I still had school, and I still had to survive. Mrs. Daly connected me with Julia Mercer, a local attorney who agreed to take my case pro bono. I learned a new term that day: emancipation. If the court grants it, Julia explained, you'll be considered a legal adult. Even though you're under 18, you'll be able to work, sign contracts, and apply for aid as an independent student. It sounded terrifying, but it was my only option. While the paperwork moved forward, I started working 3 jobs: weekends at a coffee shop, evenings shelving books at the library, Sunday afternoons doing data entry for a tiny bookkeeping firm downtown. Sleep? That became a luxury. I averaged 4 hours a night. I learned to stretch $1 until it begged for mercy. Free coffee from my barista shift became breakfast. Leftover pastries were dinner. I kept a pair of running shoes in my backpack because walking home was cheaper than catching the bus. But I refused to let my grades slip. School was the one thing they hadn't taken from me, and I'd be damned if I let them take my future too. Some days I'd study flashcards while walking between shifts. Other nights I'd code quietly at the kitchen table, earbuds in, while the dailies watched the evening news. It wasn't easy. It was barely survivable. And yet, I endured. Until one night, about 3 weeks in, I cracked. I was in bed. Well, the guest room mattress. When a panic attack hit me like a freight train. My heart raced. My vision blurred, and I couldn't catch my breath. I thought I was dying. Mrs. Daly came rushing in, sat beside me and just held my hand. No questions, no pity, just presence. You're safe, she whispered. They can't hurt you anymore. And that was when I broke down, fully and completely, because for the first time since reading that note, I actually believed her. 6 weeks after the abandonment, I stood before Judge Felton, holding my breath while Julia laid out the case. There was the note, the bank statement showing my account was cleaned out, and witness statements from neighbors who'd seen the U-Haul vanish in the night. Judge Felton didn't hesitate. Camille Rhodes, this court finds that your parents have willfully abandoned their responsibilities. Your petition for legal emancipation is granted. Just like that, I became legally alone, but fully in control of my future. The emotional weight didn't magically lift. I still had trust issues so deep I couldn't look at kindness without wondering what it wanted from me. I'd flinch when people offered to help. I avoided eye contact when teachers said I was inspiring. I didn't want to be admired. I wanted to feel safe. But slowly, I learned to build a new kind of strength. Every paycheck was a victory. Every quiz I aced. Every shift I completed without crying in the back room. Proof that I was still standing. By senior year's end, I had scraped together just enough to apply to colleges. I had no illusions of ivy-covered halls or luxury dorms. I was aiming for State University of North Carolina, an affordable in-state school with a decent computer science program. My FAFSA marked me as an independent student. That helped. So did the essay I submitted for a local scholarship titled, "What You Learn When You're Left Behind." I won. Graduation day came in a blur of caps, gowns, and long speeches. As valedictorian, I stood at the podium and gave a speech about resilience and the power of education. I didn't mention my family. I didn't need to. When I looked out into the crowd, I saw Mrs. Daly crying in the third row. My debate team held up a sign that read, "She figured it out." I smiled through trembling lips, because for the first time in months I wasn't surviving. I was moving forward. Move-in day at State University of North Carolina felt like watching someone else's life unfold. Parents were everywhere, unloading boxes, making beds, taking tearful photos. One mom cried while hanging curtains. A dad carried a microwave up 4 flights of stairs without complaint. Me? I had 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, and a heart full of panic. No welcome party. No farewell hugs. Just a dorm room with beige walls, a broken desk lamp, and a roommate I hadn't met yet. Her name was Tessa Chang, and when she walked in with her entire family, grandparents included, I nearly hid in the closet. Her dad introduced himself with a handshake. Her mom offered me a spare roll of paper towels and said, "We brought extras in case you forgot something." I hadn't forgotten. I just didn't have anything more. That night, after they took her out to dinner, Tessa returned and found me eating a granola bar on the floor. "You good?" she asked. I nodded, pretending I was. She tilted her head. "I don't know your story yet, but if you ever need backup, I'm a ride or die kind of friend." I didn't know then how much I would come to rely on her. My college schedule was brutal by design. I took a max course load, 18 credits. I worked part-time in the computer lab, answering help desk tickets and refilling paper trays. I still barely made rent. Ramen noodles, dollar store shampoo, and secondhand textbooks became my reality. But compared to what I'd survived in high school, it felt almost luxurious. At least no one could vanish overnight and leave me with nothing. It was during my second semester that I met Professor Clara Klein, who taught advanced programming systems. She saw something in me right away. "You think in code," she said during our first meeting. "Not just syntax, but structure, strategy. You're not just writing programs, you're solving puzzles." She offered me access to the faculty research lab, even though I wasn't technically qualified. "I don't care what the rules say," she waved off. "You belong there." One night, while working on a class project, I built a simple app that helped organize student assignments by workload, not just due date. A few classmates asked for copies. Then Tessa started showing it to her friends. A professor downloaded it, and for the first time, I thought, maybe this isn't just homework. Maybe it's the start of something real. Outside the classroom, life wasn't easy. I still had panic attacks. Loud noises could set me off. Unscheduled phone calls made my heart race. Holidays were the worst. While other students went home for Thanksgiving, I picked up extra shifts at the lab. For Christmas, I gave myself the luxury of a new pair of earbuds from the clearance bin. I invented rituals: Chinese takeout for New Year's Eve, a walk in the botanical gardens every finals week, tiny acts of self-care to replace the family traditions I'd lost. Tessa became my anchor. She never pushed. She never pitied. And she never once treated me like I was broken. Her parents started sending me care packages with hers. Her grandmother crocheted me a blanket for winter. When dorms closed for winter break, I had nowhere to go. "You're coming to Chicago with me," Tessa insisted. "My mom already made a guest room." I wanted to protest, to tell her I didn't want charity, but I was tired, so tired. And when we arrived in Chicago, and her dad gave me a key to their house, and her mom served hot pot for dinner, I cried in a bathroom upstairs where no one could hear. Because this was what love looked like. By junior year, I was thriving academically, but struggling emotionally. The deeper I got into tech, the more ideas I had. One stuck. It was an encryption protocol, stronger and more adaptive than anything I'd seen in class. Professor Klein looked at my prototype and said, "This is your thesis. But it's more than that. Camille, this could be a product. A real product. A real future." But I still wasn't sure I was ready. Who would take a startup seriously when its founder had once been homeless? Senior year changed everything. That fall, I attended a student-led tech symposium in Raleigh. A friend introduced me to Jordan Wells, a UX designer with a passion for cybersecurity. We stayed up all night in a campus coffee shop talking algorithms, breach risks, and startup dreams. "You handle encryption," he said. "I'll handle the front end. Let's build something that makes hackers sweat." That night, on a napkin between our lattes, CipherNest was born. We didn't have investors, we didn't have an office, but we had an idea. And each other. And sometimes, that's enough to start. Graduation arrived in a whirlwind of nerves and cap tassels. I didn't walk with parents in the crowd, but I did have a cheer squad. Tessa, Professor Klein, and Mrs. Daly, who drove in from Charlotte to see me cross the stage. "You were right," I told her after the ceremony. "I did figure it out." She squeezed my hand. "No," she said. "You rebuilt it." And that summer, with a borrowed laptop, a $300 Craigslist desk, and all the grit I had left in my bones, I became an entrepreneur. They say startups are like toddlers, needy, unpredictable, and likely to throw tantrums at the worst moments. CipherNest was no different. Jordan and I rented a tiny office space in a converted warehouse. Office was generous. It was more like a storage closet with a window and 2 folding chairs. We couldn't afford coffee, but we could afford hope. The encryption protocol I'd developed in college became the foundation of our product. We designed software that could adaptively shield companies from real-time cyber threats. Think of it like a firewall that could think for itself. But brilliance doesn't pay the electric bill. For the first 6 months, we lived on ramen, Red Bull, and sheer delusion. We worked 16-hour days, coded until our eyes blurred, slept on mismatched couches when we were too exhausted to drive home. Jordan pawned his gaming rig to cover our first server bill. I sold my grandmother's gold pendant, one of the few things I had left from her, so we could attend a cybersecurity expo in DC. That trip changed everything. We pitched CipherNest to half a dozen board executives. Most smiled politely, nodded, and said, "Too early for us." Until we met Layla Voss, an angel investor with a steel gaze and a reputation for sniffing out underdog talent. She interrupted our pitch halfway through and said, "You built this in under a year? With no seed money?" "Yes," I said, barely able to hide my anxiety. Layla leaned back. "I like underdogs. I'll put in $75,000 for a 12% stake, but I want a beta version in 60 days. That money? It felt like a miracle. We didn't celebrate. We got back to work. 2 months later, we launched CipherNest Alpha, and while it wasn't perfect, it was fast, lean, and did exactly what we promised. Smart, adaptive protection. Our first client was a mid-sized law firm in Raleigh that had recently been hacked. We secured their system, recovered their compromised data, and gave them peace of mind for the first time in months. Word spread. Within a year, we had 10 clients, then 30. By our second anniversary, CipherNest had grown to a team of 22. We moved into a real office, one with windows that actually opened. We bought real desks. I upgraded from a mattress on the floor to a small house of my own, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and more peace than I ever had growing up. And yet, even with all that growth, I still worked like I was one missed paycheck from losing everything, because part of me still believed I was. When Forbes called, I thought it was a prank. They were doing a feature on tech's new class of self-made founders, and someone had recommended me. I sat down for the interview, nervous but honest. I told them about CipherNest, about starting from scratch, about risk and resilience. I didn't tell them the whole story. I didn't say that the day after I graduated high school, I had no home, that my family had stolen my savings and left me with mustard packets and a note. I wasn't ready yet. But the article still made waves. Camille Rhodes. The encryption visionary went live that October. It painted me as a rising tech force with grit and brainpower to match. My inbox exploded. Investors, recruiters, journalists. And then, a name I hadn't seen in 15 years. Mason Rhodes, my brother. His message was simple. "Hey Camille, saw your Forbes article. Super proud of you. Would love to catch up sometime." My throat tightened. My palms went cold. I hadn't heard a single word from him or our parents since the day they vanished. Now he was proud of me? I didn't answer. Instead, I called Dr. Leona Shaw, my therapist. "This is triggering," she said gently. "You don't owe him anything. But if you want to engage, set the terms. Keep control." After 3 days, I typed a short reply. "Thanks for reaching out. Why now?" He responded within minutes. "I've regretted not reaching out sooner. Mom and Dad. They made a lot of mistakes. I was too young to fight back. I'd like to make things right." I stared at the message for a long time. He sounded sincere. But so had my parents. Once. Before they took everything. Weeks later, I agreed to meet Mason for coffee in Asheville, neutral ground halfway between us. He showed up with photos of his kids, talked about work, shared updates on relatives I hadn't thought about in years. And then, with careful phrasing, he brought them up. "Mom and Dad are in a rough spot. Dad's had some heart issues. They're not doing great financially." I didn't respond. He kept going. "They miss you. They talk about you a lot. They were proud of your interview." Proud? Proud of the success I built from the ashes they left behind? Still, a small part of me, the girl who used to win spelling bees hoping her mom would show up, wanted to believe it. Mason asked if I'd be open to a family dinner. I said I'd think about it. A few weeks later, the invitation came. A restaurant. All of them together. They'd drive in from Tennessee. Just one evening, they said. I chose the location. Upscale, downtown Charlotte. Neutral territory. Public. safe. I wore a blazer, not to impress them, but to remind myself who I had become. They arrived late, all smiles and hugs. My mother, Denise, cried as soon as she saw me. My father, Harold, tried to play the casual, doting dad. "We always knew you'd do great things," he said. "That's why we weren't worried leaving you on your own." I nearly choked on my water. Was he trying to rewrite history into some kind of twisted mentorship? They painted our past as a hard decision, a temporary sacrifice. "We thought you'd be safer," my mother whispered. Safer. Left alone in a foreclosed house with $0 and a handwritten goodbye? I let them talk. I listened. And I waited. Because I knew what was coming. It didn't take long. "Your dad's treatments are expensive," Mason finally said, looking down at his fork. "They're trying to stay afloat." Denise added, "Just a little help would go a long way. A short-term loan." There it was. The ask. 15 years of silence. One article in Forbes. And suddenly I was family again. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "I'll think about it." But what I was really thinking was this. They weren't back for me. They were back for what I'd built. After that dinner, I told myself I wouldn't fall for it. Not the tears. Not the reminiscing. Not the subtle guilt trips dressed up as compliments. But it didn't stop them from trying. First came the folder my mom handed me as we left the restaurant, stuffed with past due notices, medical bills, and a pre-filled loan request. I didn't touch it for 2 days. Then came the follow-up messages. Mason texted, "They're really struggling, Cam. I know it's a lot to ask." Denise emailed, "We're so grateful you met us. It gave us hope again." Harold even left a voicemail. "You've done so well for yourself. That's why we felt okay letting you go. Like pushing a bird out of the nest. You soared." He actually said that. As if abandonment was a parenting strategy. I forwarded everything to my attorney, Julia Mercer. We'd worked together on business contracts for years. This was the first time I brought her something personal. "They're escalating," I said, sliding the folder across her desk. She flipped through the documents, unimpressed. "They're testing your boundaries. If you give in once, it won't stop." I nodded. "I'm not giving them money." "Good," she said. "Because you might have legal options." Legal options? I hadn't thought about that. Not seriously. But Julia laid them out. A cease and desist letter for harassment and attempted financial exploitation. A civil suit for theft of my college savings, if we could tie the old bank records to them. And, if they kept pushing, a case for intentional infliction of emotional distress. "Do I really want to sue my own parents?" I asked, more to myself than to her. Julia leaned forward. "They abandoned you, Camille. They stole from you. And now they want to profit from the person you became without them." That night, I typed a response to Mason's last text. "I'm not able to offer financial support. Please respect that." I hit send and braced for impact. They didn't respect it. A week later, Denise called my company's front desk, saying she needed to speak to me urgently. 2 days after that, they showed up unannounced, standing in the lobby of CipherNest, asking to talk just for a minute. I was in a board meeting. My assistant pulled me aside, eyes wide. "There's a couple downstairs claiming to be your parents. They won't leave." I went down myself. I had to. They smiled when they saw me, as if this were normal. Harold looked around the office like he was casing it. "Wow, you've done really well. Fancy place." Denise dabbed her eyes. "We didn't know where else to go." Their rent was late. They needed $4,000. Just to avoid eviction. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about regret. It was about access. I wrote the check. Not out of compassion, but strategy. One last olive branch before I went nuclear. And then I called Julia. The cease and desist was delivered the next day. It detailed every instance of unsolicited contact, the prior theft of my savings, and made clear any further attempt to reach me would result in legal action. Their response? My father left a voicemail dripping with rage. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Maybe the world should know the truth about you. There it was. The threat. My mother took a different route. Tearful messages. Phrases like healing, family, and forgiveness. But when they continued reaching out, via Mason through mutual acquaintances, even showing up at events I attended, Julia said it was time. We file. We sued for harassment, attempted fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and we included a historical record of the financial theft and abandonment, even if the statute of limitations might limit recovery. Their response? They countersued. Their claim? That they had invested in my upbringing and were therefore entitled to a share of my company's success. Yes, they called it a return on investment. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so grotesque. The media caught wind. A local business journal ran a headline, "Tech CEO sues parents who abandoned her at 17. National outlets picked it up. My inbox filled with reporters, supporters, trolls. I stayed quiet. Julia issued a single statement. This is a private matter. Legal action became necessary after repeated boundary violations. Internally, my company stood by me. Jordan, my co-founder, took on extra duties so I could attend court. Tessa, my college roommate, flew in for moral support. Even Dr. Shah, my therapist, agreed to testify. Camille has spent years rebuilding from profound trauma. Her parents' recent actions risk undoing that progress. But the most unexpected ally? Mason. One day, he called me out of the blue. "Cam, I need to talk." He sounded different, quiet, heavy. He admitted that their plan to reconnect had been calculated, sparked by the Forbes article. He even used the words, "like winning the lottery without buying a ticket." His wife, Brianna, had threatened to leave him if he didn't tell the truth. "She said our kids won't grow up learning that kind of manipulation," Mason confessed. "So, I'm testifying for you." And he did. In court, he told everything, that they had talked about leaving me behind for months, that they waited until I was at my debate tournament because they didn't want the confrontation, that they used my savings to cover gambling debts and never intended to repay it, and that the recent requests were scripted, designed to start small and build up to larger demands. My mother cried through his testimony, muttering about betrayal and family shame. My father, unapologetic. We gave her everything for 17 years. That money was reimbursement. The courtroom went still. The judge, Angela Martinez, was sharp, calm, unshakable. When my father tried to portray their abandonment as a necessary survival decision, she interrupted. "Mr. Rhodes, are you suggesting child abandonment is an acceptable response to debt?" He fumbled. She pressed harder. "Is theft from a minor ever justifiable?" "No, Your Honor," he finally muttered, but it was too late. She'd seen who they were. We returned to court a week later for the verdict. I walked in with my shoulders back, my hands steady, and my chosen family, Tessa, Jordan, and Julia, beside me. Harold and Denise Rhodes sat across the aisle whispering. Denise clutched a tissue. Harold kept glancing toward the gallery, scanning for cameras, and Judge Martinez entered with the weight of justice in her stride. She didn't waste time. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Camille Rhodes, on all counts." I felt breath I didn't know I was holding escape from my chest. She continued. "The court further rules the defendants engaged in a pattern of harassment, attempted financial exploitation, and exhibited willful disregard for the emotional well-being of the plaintiff." Harold's jaw tightened. Denise sobbed louder, but Judge Martinez wasn't finished. The countersuit filed by the defendants, claiming entitlement to financial gains from their daughter's success, is not only meritless, it is, frankly, offensive. And then came the final order, a permanent restraining order. They were to stay 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. Zero direct contact, including through third parties. They were to pay all legal fees and $100,000 in damages for emotional distress. As we left the courtroom, Julia looked at me and said, "That's what accountability looks like." And I realized this wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Mason stopped me outside. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just stood taller now. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he said. "I knew what they were. I just didn't want to admit it." I nodded. We were kids. But now we get to choose who we are. We agreed to stay in touch, with boundaries. He wanted his children, my niece and nephew, to know the truth. I told him they were welcome in my life, but only if he kept his word and stayed clean of manipulation. He agreed, and, for now, he's kept it. A month after the verdict, I stood in front of a packed auditorium for a local TEDx talk. My topic? Figuring it out, resilience after abandonment. I told the truth. Finally. Fully. I talked about the mustard in the fridge, the note on the counter, the cold nights in someone else's guest room, wondering if I mattered at all. And I talked about the rebuild, how I used code to make sense of chaos, how I found family and friends, how I turned pain into a product, and how I turned that product into power. When I finished, the applause wasn't just polite. It was thunderous. I looked out and saw Dr. Shah in the front row, eyes glistening. Later that year, I launched something even bigger, the Figure It Out Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping teens facing abandonment, housing insecurity, or aging out of foster care. We offered emergency shelter, education grants, therapy, and mentoring. The name reclaimed the cruelty of that note, "You're smart, you'll figure it out," and turned it into a mission. Every year, we awarded 20 scholarships to students who reminded me of myself, not just survivors, builders. CipherNest became a sponsor. So did other tech firms moved by the story. Jordan and I hosted annual fundraisers, not in gala halls, but in community centers where these kids could see what was possible. Somewhere in the middle of all that work, I met Evan Blake, an architect volunteering his time to design transitional housing for one of our shelters. He was quiet, steady. The kind of man who didn't try to fix broken things, but who sat with them until they felt whole again. We went for coffee, then long walks, then dinner. He didn't flinch when I told him my story. "I've read your book," he said softly. "I know trust isn't easy. I'm willing to earn it. On your time." He kept showing up, steady, patient, kind. One day, I found myself leaning on him, not out of fear, but choice. And that was when I knew. 5 years after the lawsuit, CipherNest was acquired by a global security firm. The deal was massive, life-changing. I stayed on the board but shifted my full-time energy to the Figure It Out Foundation, now operating in 6 states. The money gave me freedom. But it was meaning that gave me peace. Because true wealth isn't what I put in a bank. It's the kids who walk into our shelters broken and leave with diplomas. It's the single moms we help re-enroll in community college. It's every survivor who finds out they weren't disposable. And my biological parents? After violating the restraining order 3 times, they finally moved back to Tennessee. No more messages, no more threats. Just silence. And I'm okay with that. Because I've replaced what I lost. I found mentors who lifted me, friends who fought for me, partners who didn't walk away. I built a family, not of blood, but of bond. If you've made it this far, thank you. This wasn't just a story about betrayal, It was about what comes after. About boundaries. About courage. About taking back your story from the people who tried to write your ending without your consent. If someone ever left you with nothing but a note and an empty house, you can still build something beautiful. You can still soar.